Hello and welcome into episode 115 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I'm your host, Mark Harris, flying solo this episode and also flying blind, basically, because my laptop camera is not working. So much fun. So for the YouTube audience, you'll just see screen shares, and for the podcast audience, it'll be same as usual because you don't see me on the podcast. So with that out of the way, you got kind of a little bit of everything we're talking about in this episode. Going to start with all the fun stuff that's going on with the men's basketball program, touch on baseball and hockey, and some kind of news and notes from the football program, or around the football program, I should say. And then close it out with an analysis of something that Kenny Dillingham said on the Next Up with Adam Brenneman podcast last week. I recommend everyone listen to that. It was very interesting. Kind of a deeper dive into some stuff with Dillingham. So he made a pretty interesting claim on that show, and I kind of wanted to dive into it. So that'll be later on in the show. Before any of that, please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice, and follow the College Huddle. Best fan podcast network in the country. Tons of great shows. Even the U of A show is good. Went on that show about 2 weeks ago with Adam Green and Brent Berry. Other Big 12 shows are good. The Cocaine Willie, the Kansas State show, that's a good one too. So make sure to check those out. I like to listen to those when I get the chance. All right. Let's get the bad news out of the way. ASU basketball just continues to free fall. They have lost 5 in a row. It feels like they've lost way more than 5 in a row, but that 70-68 win over Colorado a few weeks ago technically stemmed the tide on that. But just bad, it's not. It's tough because it's not like they play every single game that they play is a bad performance. Like their loss at Texas Tech on Wednesday night, 111-106 double overtime loss in Lubbock. I'm not even mad at that loss. I'm not even mad at them for that loss. I can be upset with some individual plays. I thought ASU Hurley shouldn't have called a timeout with 10 seconds left to go in regulation when they're up by 2. Gave Texas Tech a chance to regroup, and of course, they get an offensive rebound and tie the game. And then at the end of the first overtime, you have 2 just dumb turnovers that prevent you from winning. But in all, that was a good game. However, it is sandwiched between 2 very bad games. Losing at Oklahoma State by 13 points in a game that thankfully no one could see, including myself. I didn't watch that game. It kind of got hidden in the shuffle of the Super Bowl, but that was a really bad loss. And unfortunately, it had Jaden Quaintance get injured on a cheap shot from one of the Oklahoma State defenders. So it's just, bad. The more and more bad luck just keeps coming with this program. Quaintance has been out. ASU has felt his absence. But it doesn't help when you get guys just getting suspended all the time. Miller and Freeman were out for the Oklahoma State game. And Miller got himself ejected against TCU, and on Saturday night in a 74-70 loss. And this was I should be clear. I could have gone to this game. I just didn't. I literally had nothing going on. I'm just sick of seeing these ugly performances by ASU, and they were down, 10 points for most of the second half. They were in the first half, 29-20 TCU, 32-22 TCU with 3 minutes left to go in the first half. Halftime, 7-point TCU lead. TCU was up, 57-46, 11. Like they're just up. They're just kind of hanging on to a 10-point lead for the whole, or not the whole second half, but most of the second half. And then ASU, makes it close. They're down by 1. They're down by 3. Oh, could they do it? And they don't. They mess it up. I believe Bashir Jihad had a foot on the line at a late inbounds play. So, good game from BJ Freeman. Alston Mason continues to play well. It's not that these individual players aren't playing well. It just doesn't all come together. And so, at the last show we did 10 days ago, last Wednesday, we talked about how Hurley, it just feels like the Hurley era is over. It feels even more so like the Hurley era is over after this loss to TCU, the loss to Oklahoma State, on the road loss to Texas Tech. It just feels like we are running out the string. Still 6 games left to go in the season. My God, that is not. I don't know. I wish this season would just be over. You host Houston on Tuesday, and you could win that game. The ASU could totally win that game. They took Texas Tech to double overtime. They're competitive with Iowa State, competitive with U of A. Like, they could win that game, but it wouldn't change anything about the season. It would just be a nice moment in a bad season that's gone off the tracks. You're 3-11 in the Big 12, and you sure look like the second worst team. Like, throughout the course of the season, it's either been you or Oklahoma State that looks like the second worst team. Colorado, they're the worst. They cannot be beaten in that respect. But yeah, it just feels like it's over. And I know Graham Rossini said sometime last week that there weren't really any rumors, and that Bobby Hurley is the coach. That's fine. He has to say that. He can say that. Unfortunately, the basketball team is making this decision easier and easier with every passing game. I mentioned this to a friend, and I don't like that my mindset kind of has reached this place, but I'm not rooting for ASU to lose. But they're 12-13. If they go 4-2 down the stretch, that gets them to 16-15. Or if they go 5-1 down the stretch. I mean, even saying this out loud, like, they're not going 5-1 down the stretch. But if they do, whatever, they finish 17-14 or whatever. I don't think it would be good for the program long term to bring back Hurley another year. We've seen what this is. We've seen it. It feels like if you can't, break through this year, then when are you going to break through? The Big 12 is not as good as people thought it was going to be this year. It's still better than, what the Pac-12 has been these years. And you expected some losses, but and when you factor in all the suspensions that these guys have had, and seems like learned behavior, it's not like Hurley's keeping his cool all the time. It sucks. I mean, we had high expectations for this team this year. So did the program. And it's been a disaster in truth. Like, it can't look like this. So I don't know. Like, I've been, rooting for the Hurley era to do well. But it's time. This is over. And when you add in that he mentioned that, like, at the end of Saturday's game, that some of the players, he said out loud, some of the players didn't want to even hear from him after the game. Like, it just feels like it's off the tracks. That doesn't mean they can't beat Houston on Tuesday. Okay. I'm not even saying that, but I don't know. Like, this is done. I feel like at this point you're just playing for pride. So, I wish the players the best. I don't really have anything bad to say about the players. Like, sure, it would be great if they executed better in some certain situations and kept their cool a bit more, but I don't know. It just feels like it doesn't even matter right now. Like, these games don't matter. Nobody cares. That's another thing. Like, there's any sort of buzz is gone. I feel like the only people defending Bobby at this point are the people on the payroll. and that's fine. But when it's only them defending the coach, then that's your answer right there. And I know that it's a huge challenge with Desert Financial Arena. That's not going anywhere, and that's going to be a huge obstacle for whomever the next coach is. But you have to try something new. You can't just roll it back. I couldn't think of a more dead on arrival in terms of fan excitement ASU basketball season than if they brought back Hurley for 25-26. It's just, I think everyone has seen that, like, there's not going to be a breakthrough. There's not going to be, even if they get Koa Pete, which I don't think they will, but even if they did, then they would like barely make the tournament or something. It's just, it's such an obvious time for a break. And I bet if you gave Bobby Hurley some truth serum, he would agree as well. You have him go out with his son, Trey Hurley, Bobby Hurley Jr., or the third, I should say, Bobby Hurley the third, who has a 100% shooting percentage, which I think is freaking awesome. If I were him, I would never shoot again in a game. But you have him as a senior, right? I think he's a senior. Should check that. Yeah, so this is his. It's loading. Yep, this is his last year. So it's a good end point, And if you're Hurley, you can get a job somewhere else. He'll be able to get a job somewhere on the East Coast, some in the American Conference, or somewhere in as a high major, or not a high major, a mid major, an Atlantic 10 job, something like that. Like, they would take him. He's recruited well enough to earn another job, and his overall results at ASU, I would say, have been, if we're measuring it like WAR, like baseball, I'd give him like a plus WAR, not by a lot, but I'd say it's a little bit better than average compared to what the replacement would have been. Remember, they have 3 tournament appearances. And I get it. It's the first 4, and they haven't made it to the second round. All of those critiques are true, but they have made it to the tournament 3 times in 10 years. And really, I mean, the 2020, I'll give that to him. So 4 times in 10 years, you make the tournament as an ASU men's basketball coach. That's, in the grand scheme of ASU men's basketball, 4 tournament appearances in 10 years is pretty good. However, these past 2 years, like, no. And really, everything after the pandemic, really, like these last 5 seasons, right? Yeah. The 2 after COVID were bad. And there was a legit excuse for that because the program took a lot of hits during COVID. So I'll give them that. But then in 2023, they make the tournament, barely, but they make it with the Cambridge brothers, Warren Washington, DJ Horn, Frankie Collins, that crew. And, they lose to TCU, but they make the like, that was a good season that, for ASU. Last year was a disappointment. I mean, the way the season ended, it was a complete disaster. And this year has been the most underwhelming in terms of talent relative to actual production that we've seen at ASU men's basketball. So it's over. I get that Graham Rossini has to say they support the men's and women's basketball programs, and there's no rumors, all that. Like, that's fine. He can say that. And if they have to keep Hurley because of the house settlement and paying players, and there's all these talks of schools being less willing to fire coaches because they don't know how the money's all going to shake out with the house settlement coming up this summer. Like, if that's the reason he returns, then you know what? Fine. Like, I'm fine with that. And I believe it was about 2 years ago at the University of Washington that they kept Mike Hopkins after a disappointing season. And one of the reasons why they kept him is because they brought back they put in extra money to bring back a lot of the offensive staff for the UW football team. And so the rationale was, okay, like the trade-off of bringing, having all this resources going into the football team the upcoming year is that you keep the basketball coach. I think a lot of ASU fans would sign up for that begrudgingly, but they would sign up for that. But I don't know if that really applies, right? Like we know that a lot of the money with the athletic department has kind of been integrated with the actual school. And so that could give them a lot more optionality, a lot more functionality, as we see with ASU committing to 34 scholarships for baseball, which I won't get into big detail on that right now, but that's a big thing for the baseball program. The 3-0 Sun Devils moving forward. So, but my point is like money reasons is the only reason that Bobby Hurley can reasonably return. Right? Like there's no one's defending him at this point. And you can't. It's just this has just run its course. So I still defend the Hurley era as a whole, given the context of ASU men's basketball, but that doesn't mean you can just go on forever with it. So that's that on the men's basketball program. I'll touch on the women's basketball program too, because Graham Rossini mentioned that both the men's and women's program, like, there's no rumors. We just need to continue supporting them and this and that. Like the women's team quietly has lost 11 games in a row. And look, ASU men's basketball, they're losing close games for the most part, right? The women's basketball team, not so much. So I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't want to fire two basketball coaches in the same offseason, but if you're looking at ASU athletics right now as a whole, football's doing well. Women's volleyball doing well. Hockey, not a great weekend series for them, but generally doing well. Baseball, I think baseball is looking like it's doing well. Golf and some of the other, ancillary sports are generally on the upswing. Softball, TBD. There's a real just void in the basketball programs, plural. And maybe you can only fix one this year. And if you can only fix one, it's tough. From a fan base perspective, you fix the men's basketball program or you attempt to fix the men's I should say that, because firing Hurley, like the next coach will probably not do as well long term, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't make the change. In terms of like what the fan base wants, they want to change with men's basketball. What the results warrant, if you can only pick one, then it's easily the women's basketball needs a change, because they've just been way more outclassed that on a just game by game basis, just in terms of the scoreboard, than ASU men's basketball has. Some of that's just kind of a function of women's college basketball, but still. So they might only be able to pick between getting rid of one, and that'll make an interesting decision for Graham Rossini, and potentially the first really unpopular move that he'll have to make or not make. So that is an interesting kind of subplot as this seasons winds down for both of them. But I guarantee you he's facing more, like if we're just going by like his emails or the fans that are contacting him, like he's probably hearing a lot more about the Hurley and the men's basketball program. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. My opinion is they need to figure out something to get a new coach in here on the men's basketball side, and it just feels like it's run its course. So not fun. All right, let's shift over to ASU men's hockey. Not a great weekend for them. They lose in overtime on Friday night at Minnesota Duluth, and then they get a 3-3 overtime shootout win on Saturday night. Now, I don't fully understand how like the overtime point system works, and because there's different rules for like the conference play and the NCHC. So in the conference standings, ASU is second place after this weekend. They have 40 points. Western Michigan, who ASU hosts this weekend, Friday and Saturday nights at Mullet, is the only team ahead of them at 45 points. So in the conference standings, ASU's 2 overtime results didn't help them, didn't negatively affect them, I should say. But in the overall national results, in the pairwise, they dropped down to 15 after entering this weekend at 13. So that's why I say it wasn't a great weekend for them. They still have everything ahead of them with Western Michigan coming to Tempe this weekend. But you need to see this program finish out the season strong and make the tournament. I think it would be very disappointing for ASU men's hockey to not make the tournament, just based on how they've played this year. I think they have played well enough to be a tournament team. But, with all the different, you got Massachusetts, Quinnipiac, whatever, the Big Ten teams. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But I just if they don't make it, we might be looking back at this weekend like, man, if you had just gotten one regulation win at Duluth, then you might have been in better shape. Of course, there is just the scenario that Duluth is kind of a tough matchup for them. They went in when they played in December. ASU, I don't know what EN means. They had one win and they had one overtime win. So they played them close, though. I should know what EN means. I don't know what it means. But oh well. Yeah, but to bring it back to this, just not a great weekend for them. So it'll be extremely important for ASU men's hockey to play really well against Western Michigan. This has potential to be the biggest ASU hockey series ever. I don't know if that might be a little hyperbolic, but in terms of potentially winning the conference, if they win both these games, then they would pass Western Michigan in the NCHC standings, I believe, or they would at least give themselves a much, much better chance at making the NCAA tournament. So it's I bet it'll be a great environment at Mullet this upcoming weekend. And it means a lot for them. So if you're on the fence, if you've never been to Mullet before, if you've wanted to check out ASU hockey, this is the weekend to go. And if you can't go on Friday night, you'll be able to watch the game on Fox 10, which I love that so much. I love that ASU hockey was able to get that figured out. They had their Saturday night game on AZ Family. On the 15th. So if you are like I said, if you are looking to check out an ASU hockey game, going to a game against Western Michigan this weekend would be a good first time to do so. And they will need those wins based on the pairwise rankings. All right, let's get out of ASU men's hockey. Oh, yay. No, I'm going to let's just get back to sharing the men's basketball tab. Okay. Close out. Oh, this is so fun. I love when I have the hockey stuff open, and it slows my computer down a lot. Goodbye, hockey stuff. ASU baseball swept Ohio State. I should mention that. 9-8 on Friday, 7-6 walk-off win on Saturday, and then a 17-10 4-hour game on Sunday. I feel sorry for the young Cronkite students covering their first baseball game, having to be there for like 6 hours because it was a 17-10 game. I don't have a whole lot of in-depth thoughts on that series, but it's kind of similar to, granted they played Ohio State, but it's kind of similar to ASU men's basketball not losing any dumb games early in the year. The first two games of this series weren't particularly impressive because, Ohio State, it's not like it's a blue blood baseball program and you beat them by a combined 2 runs in the first two games. Then you allow 10 runs in game 3, but it's 3-0. And with ASU baseball in recent years, you can't just expect them to be on autopilot and just make it to the NCAA tournament, even let alone Omaha. So that's the standard. Graham Rossini said it was the standard to make it to Omaha last week. I believe him based on his baseball background with ASU. So I would say the program seems like or the team, I should say, seems like it's in a pretty good spot to make some noise this year, or at least make the NCAA tournament for baseball. One more cool thing I saw from ASU baseball is that they had the largest opening weekend crowd in ASU history, ASU baseball history. The largest opening weekend crowd, 10,570 people. I'm surprised that it took this long to have the largest crowd. Maybe it's because it's Ohio State and they have a lot of fans in general, a lot of fans in the Valley. Maybe there's some renewed hope about the ASU baseball program. I don't know what it is. I am kind of surprised that this weekend is when this was the opening series that ASU baseball has its largest 3-game attendance, but still a good sign. Still a good sign. And maybe it's some people who were upset at Ray Anderson in years past and kind of didn't want to support the program until he was gone, and they want to support because of Rossini. That could be it. That probably is it for a good chunk of people there. So either way, it's good to see ASU baseball get off to a good start, and they have a chance to go 7-0 because they play Austin P at home either on Tuesday or Wednesday. That should be a win, and then they host Oral Roberts next weekend for a 3-game series. And I'll be honest, Oral Roberts could be one of those smaller schools that secretly has a good baseball program, like a Houston Baptist or like Cal State Fullerton or something like that. So maybe they're a much tougher team than I anticipate. But I'm going to imagine that ASU baseball sweeps Oral Roberts next weekend against the 7-0, and that would be great. That would be great. It may not portend to fantastic results for them in conference play, but still pretty good. So you can't. I mean, you can nitpick how ASU baseball won its games against Ohio State. If I had higher expectations for them this year, then I would be a little bit more critical of how they won those games, just the amount of runs they gave up. But since this is kind of just a year of let's just get back to the tournament, it's been too long since you've been in the NCAA tournament. Coach Bloomquist, he needs to make the tournament to save his job. Just get the wins. So good to see that. Another thing that happened, moving on to football, I got some good news before I share some confounding news, I would say. Eric Allen going to the Hall of Fame, former ASU corner, 6-time Pro Bowl selection. He was on the 86 Rose Bowl team, and I don't know why it's showing a UW coach, but okay. Thanks, Athlon. It's another guy that makes the Hall of Fame for ASU, and people thought that the ASU player who was going to make it was Terrell Suggs, and he did not make the Hall of Fame. Darren Woodson was also in the mix. It says that on this Athlon article that Eric Allen is the 5th Sun Devil to make the Hall of Fame. I don't believe that's true. I believe there's 6 members by school football. Either way, so yeah, it's Randall McDaniel, Mike Haynes, Charlie Taylor from the 60s, defensive tackle Curly Culp, Eric Allen. There is one more guy that is forgotten. Oh, it's John Henry Johnson, class of 1987. He was a fullback. Oh, okay. So that's why. John Henry Johnson, who played at ASU in the 50s. So this is a long time ago. But he started his college career at St. Mary's and then went on to Arizona State. So in reality, Eric Allen is there. That is so dumb. Whoever wrote this article should have looked that up because it's literally on the Pro Football Hall of Fame site. Andy Patton. Andy, I don't know you. You should have done a little bit extra work and noticed that there were 5 Sun Devils already in the Hall of Fame. Eric Allen will be the 6th. And soon, Terrell Suggs will be the 7th, which is pretty cool for a school like ASU to have 7 guys in the Hall of Fame. I mean, they don't right at the moment, but they will because Terrell Suggs will get in probably within the next 2 years. And then Darren Woodson also has a chance to make it as well. So, 5 years from now, there's a chance ASU has 5 players in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I'm sorry, 5 years from now. 5 years from now, there's a chance ASU has 8 players in the Hall of Fame, which that's really good for a non-blue blood. Not only that, some of these schools that have a lot of players in the Hall of Fame, it's because they just got started, earlier on, right? Like Army and Notre Dame, Minnesota, all these, Northeastern schools that just played college football earlier than ASU did. So, all these guys, I mean, John Henry Johnson, who I just mentioned, who was left out of this Athlon article, he, played at ASU in the 50s, Culp and Charlie Taylor in the 60s, Mike Haynes, 70s, as we know, Randall McDaniel, 80s, along with Eric Allen, also in the 80s. And then you add in Suggs and potentially Darren Woodson. So that would be pretty cool to have all those guys in. And I think it's possible. Darren Woodson's definitely he's kind of on the bubble. But then again, I thought Eric Allen was on the bubble as well. Eric Allen, of those 3, of Suggs, Woodson, and himself, is definitely the least well-known among average football fans. Darren Woodson gets the nod just because he was on those Cowboys teams, and then Terrell Suggs was just better than both of those guys in the NFL, and it was insane in college. And so it's that's cool to see. A Sun Devil getting recognition. So congratulations, Eric Allen. Go Birds. Colton isn't here to congratulate this Eagles player that he definitely followed throughout his career. That's a lot of sarcasm there. But pretty cool for a guy like Eric Allen to make the Hall of Fame. In terms of some Sun Devils not getting recognized, I was disappointed to see that Cam Skattebo was the only Arizona State player invited to the Combine. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous that Cam Skattebo is the only ASU player invited to the NFL Combine. Shamari Simmons and Leif Fautanu should be there alongside Cam Skattebo. It's like at least Shamari Simmons should be. It's just an oversight. There's no actual good reason for Shamari Simmons to not be invited. He has the stats, he has the turnovers, he has the pop plays as well. Just look at the freaking college football playoff game. He had a safety right when he got in. And so, and not only that, in the article, it doesn't say who wrote it. I want to give him credit. But whoever wrote this article, first team All Big 12 offensive lineman Leif Fautanu and defensive back Shamari Simmons didn't make it on Arizona Sports, by the way. They're both first-team players, and they started all the games. ASU won 11 games this year, and I'm supposed to believe that Leaf Fautanu and Shamari Simmons just have no business being at the Combine? Just ridiculous to me. I'm not saying they need to even be drafted. Well, they should get drafted. Let me rephrase that. But I'm not saying they have to be like talked about as these like incredible, outstanding, no doubt about it players that are supposed to go in the first 3 rounds. I'm not saying that, but they should be at the Combine. And I get it. Like a lot of ASU's players are coming back this next year, so it's not like it's suggesting that it was only Scadaboo this year, because that's not true. But I'm sorry, Shamari Simmons and Leaf Fautanu should be at the Combine. It's ridiculous that they're not. Not every single run that Scadaboo had was him, grinding out 3 yards a carry because he wasn't getting any blocking from his offensive line. No, Leaf Fautanu was a 2-year starter, again, on a team that went 11-2 prior to the playoff game, 11-3 overall. It's ridiculous. So I hope he gets the chance to show out in the pro day. Shamari Simmons at least got to do some stuff at the Shrine Bowl, had a great interception, over the shoulder interception for a safety, not easy to do. NFL. So that's that on those guys not getting a Combine invite. It will be interesting to see what Scadaboo, what he runs in the 40, and also like how he performs in like squats or some of these other strength metrics. And honestly, how he performs in just like catching the ball. We always see the wide receiver that runs through the cones and has to catch the ball on each side. I don't know if they do that for running backs, but if I'm Scadaboo, I'm entering myself into that, because one of the best parts of his game this year, beyond just breaking tackles and contact balance, is his receiving ability. So that should be something that he wants to show off at the Combine. All right, now to the meat of this episode. 37 minutes in, my word. I should make sure people can skip some of that. Last week, our own Kenny Dillingham went on the Next Up podcast. What's the official name of the podcast? Next Up with Adam Brenneman podcast. And he had, I would say, 3 interesting things that he mentioned, but one that stood out among the rest. So I found it interesting that he purposefully went to coach for a defensive coach in Dan Lanning in the 2022 football season, because Dillingham, who is kind of like, if you're listening to this podcast, he's like us in that he is an ASU sicko. So he was following all the comings and goings with the program and knew that Herm Edwards wasn't going to be there for a long time. And so he played his cards right to be like, hey, I'm going to be an offensive coordinator on a defensive head coach team, so therefore I can stand out and get a job quicker. And I love him having that kind of mindset, because that's what you need to succeed as a football coach, to look around the corner, to be able to see what's coming next. And by doing that, that put him in position to get this job, and it's worked out for him so far. I think it's also helped, him as a former ASU student, kind of know the lay of the land at ASU and some of the unique difficulties and the unique strengths that come with this place. So I thought that was very interesting, that just he kind of planned out specifically playing for a defensive coach, and then knowing, hey, like I can use this to potentially jump off and get a head coaching job. He also had a kind of throwaway quote. Not throwaway, but a quote where he mentioned players aren't coming to ASU because of money. He mentioned that they get paid well, which is important, because I don't want Dillingham mentioning that, like, oh, we're doing this with less money and all this. It's like, we're doing it with less money compared to like the Blue Bloods, yes, but not compared to like the average school in our conference, or in some cases just the average school. So I thought that was it was more of a throwaway line, but I did think the reason I mentioned that is because it's important for him to say our players are getting paid well, because they are. Like, I'm a big Cover 3 podcast listener, and Bud Elliott has mentioned a few times on recent shows that Oregon came after Sam Levitt this past offseason. And I mean, any school should have been coming after Sam Levitt in the offseason. Sam Levitt obviously chose to stay at ASU. He probably could have gotten more money at Oregon, but ASU was at least able to provide a competitive and substantial compensation package to the point where he doesn't have to, make a tough decision. The ASU has enough money, NIL money spending, that like, yeah, we may not be able to match what Oregon can pay, what Tennessee or Ohio State can pay, but we can give you, whatever, 75% of that. I don't know what that's the real, percentage, but we can give you a certain amount of that, and you'll want to stay because we have good culture, we have good coaching, you're an ASU, all this stuff. So I thought it was important that he kind of mentioned that, like, we have enough money, but we're not attracting people here because of money. But really, the most interesting thing that he said was that he thinks Arizona State can level up and become the next blue blood in college football. Quote, "I really believe this place has the tools necessary." Very, very interesting to hear that from Kenny Dillingham. So in that part of the episode with Adam Brenneman, he mentioned that Oregon and Clemson were teams that have been able to do that in past decades. Oregon was the team that leveled up in the 2000s. Clemson was the team that leveled up in the 2010s. He said every 10 years, a new team levels up, and he thinks ASU can be the team that levels up in the 2020s. Do I fully agree? Do I fully agree that ASU can level up to be a blue blood? I want to fully agree, but I don't. I don't think ASU can level up to be a blue blood. But I love that Dillingham is thinking like this. This is the type of vision that you need at ASU. This is his vision. And so if ASU doesn't level up to a blue blood, it won't be because we aren't trying, right? Or the coaching staff isn't trying. It won't be for a lack of attempting to do it, and that's great, because then you can at least squeeze out everything possible from your teams and win 10 games on a year where you maybe have the talent to go 8-4. Instead, you go 10-2. I'm not applying that to last year's team, but when you look at last year's team, at the end of the year, you look back and it's like, yeah, we probably got everything out of the roster. Maybe you could argue not because we should have won the Texas game if a few calls go our way. But like, you don't look at last year's season being like, man, we really left a lot on the table. We left a lot of meat on the bone. I don't think so. The game you lose at Texas Tech. They just should have lost that game. Texas Tech was the better team that day. Levitt just wasn't ready for that type of game, and it showed. And it's fine. And then at Cincinnati, you lose in part because Levitt wasn't available for that game, and you didn't have a reliable kicker. You have, unfortunately, Scadaboo had a really bad fumble that kind of put them behind in this game a lot earlier than they otherwise would have been. So you have all these things that just don't go your way. And then the Texas game, that was a coin flip game, essentially. So if you have this, a guy like Dillingham trying to reach the top, then you might, what's the saying? You shoot for the stars and you end up on the moon or whatever. Like, maybe ASU doesn't level up to become where Oregon and Clemson are, but maybe they level up to a place where they're just like a Kansas State of the past, however many years, where you're just a good program that's just continuously good, And maybe you never break through to become a blue blood, but it's not it. You're always at the door. You're always winning 10 games type of deal. So anyway, that's not what Dillingham is aiming for. He's not aiming to be the next, Kansas State. He's not aiming to be Kyle Whittingham's Utah. He's aiming to be Oregon. He's aiming to be Clemson. And so with that in mind, let's kind of do a rudimentary checklist of how does ASU compare to Oregon and Clemson in the grand scheme of things that is college football. I have 7 qualifications here. No one, if you're on listening to the podcast, I have history, location, recruiting base, money, fan support, coach, high-level QB at some point. So some of these can be conflate with one another. Like I would say location and recruiting base are, some people might think those are kind of the same. I don't. You could say money and fan support are the same. I think they're very similar, but not necessarily. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I think I narrowed it down to 7 kind of qualifications to judge these programs. So let's start with history. I'm going to do every single one on a 1 through 10 scale. So let's go with history. I'm going to give ASU history, all-time history, 6.5 out of 10. This is a program that has a 60% winning percentage all-time. Again, all-time doesn't mean everything, but it means something. So, and I should point out that Dillingham mentioned in that interview that high school kids, they don't have this backlog of knowledge of who was good in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. They just know who was good at the moment. And so this is why I'd much rather be, Clemson than Nebraska, because even though Nebraska has a way bigger, has accomplished much more than Clemson has in college football over the grand scheme of things, Clemson has done it more recently, and therefore that's better. Now, history, of course, matters. Like I could, Notre Dame hasn't won a national championship since 1988, I believe. And so, but because of their history, their brand, everything, their overall program, they're still in the mix. And I mean, they just played for a national championship too, so that helps. Anyway, with ASU, just to tie it back to this judgment of them, I'm giving the 6.5 out of 10 history. You have really good years in the WAC that could have been a national championship in 1975. That's a real offseason episode. I think ASU, I think it was the Sporting News that claimed them as number 1 the end of that year. Do I 100% believe that the 1975 Sun Devils were the best team in the country that year? I don't. But teams have claimed national titles with less tangible reasons to do so than had if ASU claims the 1975 chip. So anyway, that's not a real. But like the point being, they were good in the 20 or geez, not 20 in the 1970s, 80s and 90s, hit or miss, kind of, right? Like, and then it's been a lot of hit or miss in the Pac-12 where you pop up with a 10-win season, then kind of go back down. But you go back down to being like 7-5, 6-6 for the most part. That's kind of been the base for ASU football, save for the last 2 years, or not the last 2 years, 2022 and 23 when the bottom fell out. That is the aberration of ASU football in terms of record, not, going 7-5, So anyway, overall history with ASU, I'm going to give them a 6.5 out of 10. I'm going to skip Oregon. They were a weird one. I'm going to give Clemson 8 out of 10. So they had won a national championship, I believe, in 1980. I think it's Danny Ford, the coach. I don't know. And they had also been like a good team in the ACC. So I'll give Clemson like an 8 out of 10 history. Good history, better than ASU entering there before they got good, but not outstanding. And then Oregon, I'll go 5 out of 10. Pre-Phil Knight, ASU was considered a better program than Oregon. I don't. They were just pretty average. They did have some really good high level quarterbacks. Dan Fouts. Oh, who's the old guy? Who's Norm Van Brocklin went to Oregon. And then they have the big some moments in the '90s, but overall I'd say Oregon 5 out of 10. Location. Let's go location for ASU. I'm gonna say it's 8 out of 10. Why do I say it's 8 out of 10 and not 10 out of 10? Because it's in a city. And so that comes with some awesome benefits, right? But it also means that it takes a lot for ASU to be the top sporting team, right? To be the top of the zeitgeist in the Phoenix market. It took last year's season, right? So they can get drowned out with the Suns and the Diamondbacks and the Cardinals, And I think a good test to do this is just look at the content that Arizona Sports is producing. Arizona Sports 98.7. It's all Suns stuff right now, which is fine. I'm not arguing that they should do that. They should program it differently, but that's like the Suns are the top team in the Phoenix metro area. Then the Cardinals are number 2. And then you can flip-flop between ASU and the Diamondbacks. It both kind of are running hot right now. The Diamondbacks, even though they barely missed the playoffs last year, they're still, freshly made a World Series championship. So yeah, I'll give ASU 8 out of 10. I also think being in Phoenix is good for recruiting, but it's not like, I think sometimes local media people act like the Phoenix metro area is like the best. It is like on par with the best recruiting areas in the country. We're not in Atlanta. This isn't like near Atlanta. It's not like it's near Houston. We're not in Florida. We're not in Southern California. I would put all of those regions ahead of Arizona. But it's still 8 out of 10. Like, it's still Tempe. It's still an attractive place to go. It's not the hardest place to get people into. So there we go. Oregon. I'm giving them a 2 out of 10 in terms of location. There is very little high school talent in the state of Oregon. Sam Levitt and Jaden Fortier notwithstanding. Not only that, they aren't by population centers in the state of Oregon, right? It's not like they're It's not like they're in Salem, Oregon, and they're right outside of Portland, and they're closer to Washington, where there's a little bit more talent. No, and it's just Pacific Northwest, just very far away from just the vast majority of population in the country. So ASU has an advantage before, like, in history, overall history and location, than Oregon does. Now, if we're talking about history today, I should put history entering blue blood era. Okay, that's a better way to number it. Okay. And then Clemson, I'm going to give them I'm going to give them 10 out of 10 in terms of location. They top team in South Carolina. They're right by Atlanta. They can get kids from Atlanta so easily. It's like a 2-hour drive. Down south, it just matters more. And I guess this kind of factors into their location is that they're like an SEC school that plays in the ACC. So I'm sure, in some of these championship runs that they've had, I'm sure they had to grind out a few games that they may otherwise would have lost. And yeah, so being in the ACC helped them kind of avoid that. Recruiting base is a little different than location. I'm just going to get ASU. I'll go 7 out of 10 on recruiting base. I don't think it's I think for a lot of the same reasons with location. They're close to California, not too far away from Texas, close to Vegas, and then obviously the Phoenix area. But one thing that does hurt them, and this is something I've talked about, is there are just a lot of kids in Arizona that want to play out of state. And they don't have the natural connection to ASU. So that's why I'm putting recruiting base at 7 out of 10. It's not like ASU will ever, and then it's these kids from Southern California, like ASU is not going to be their top choice if they get offered by USC. It's just not. So, yeah. Oregon. All right, you know what? Now that I kind of go through this, because I was going to get Oregon a 10 out of 10 recruiting, but that's because of their money. So I'll just delete recruiting base. So it's going to be history entering blue blood era, location, money, fan support, coach, high level QB at some point. Yeah. So money, ASU, that's a 5 out of 10. It could be a 4 out of 10. I don't know. I don't know if it's 5 out of 10. I think ASU is sufficient based on what we've seen this offseason and all of the starters being retained. Clearly, it's not a disaster, but if it were a lot better, we'd be recruiting a lot better. So ASU 5 out of 10 in money. Oregon is a 11 out of 10 in money. No, you can't do any higher, but Oregon's 10 out of 10. Uncle Phil's there. He's the reason if we are making a percentage pie of why Oregon is at this point a blue blood, clearly the best program that hasn't won a national championship, it's because of Phil Knight. He's the number one reason. He's not the only reason, okay? He's not the only reason. They obviously, Phil Knight isn't going out there and making tackles and, scheming up plays and all that. But the money, the Nike influence, come on. He's the driving force behind why Oregon is where it is right now. So 10 out of 10. Clemson, I think they're 7 out of 10. They probably have, a more dedicated donor base than ASU does. But it doesn't seem like Clemson is just overflowing with money the way some of these schools are down south. And it seems like with some of these southern schools, it's a very case-by-case basis. Like Georgia seems like to be in a better position with NIL than Alabama is, for example. Fan support, I'm going to give ASU another 5 out of 10. We'll see. This could change, but I'm not gonna lie and say that it's, ASU is this awesome, fan base that always shows up. That's just not true. So that's why I put 5 out of 10. It's not the worst, right? I mean, despite some other fan bases might try to tell you that ASU is like Cal or Stanford, and that's not true either. So 5 out of 10 for ASU. I'll give Oregon a 6.5 out of 10 in the fan base ranking. The fact that they're in Eugene complicates this. They have a smaller stadium too, so that makes it a little easier. And they don't have to the fan base doesn't have to be quite as responsible for NIL because of Phil Knight and a few other donors. So good fan base. I'm not here to, crap on the Oregon fan base, but I'll give them a 7 out of 10. And then Clemson, I'll just do 10 out of 10. That feels about right. I mean, now when I look at location, I'll give Clemson 9 out of 10 because I think being in South Carolina, there's not quite as many players there, so I'll give 9 out of 10 for them on location. Coach, so Dillingham, man, this is a tough one. I'll say Dillingham so far is 8 out of 10. There's still some things he has to prove, but he clearly seems like he knows what he's doing. So for Oregon, I'll put their coaching 9 out of 10. This is Mike Bellotti and Chip Kelly and Cristobal and Lanning. Clearly very good, and Dabo. All right. Dabo, oh man, Dabo's tough. I will give Dabo 8.5 out It kind of feels weird to give Oregon more coaching than Dabo. This is a tough exercise. I don't know. And maybe I should give Dabo a 10 out of 10, but I don't totally believe that with how he's handled, with how long it took Clemson to get there. Maybe I'll switch it around. I'll just give both of them a 9 out of 10. I think the reason why all of these are so high, like you have to have the coaching to break through, right? So that's why I'll just make it even with Dabo and Chip Kelly at 9 out of 10. And you know what? Now that I look at the money, I'm giving Oregon an 11 out of 10 on money because if we're being honest, this is why they have made it this far. High level QB at some point. This is the crucial in turn because Dillingham's talking about winning a national championship, right? When you're talking about breaking through as a blue blood, it's not going to the Peach Bowl and even winning a playoff game. It is making it to the national championship at worst and sustaining very high level play like Oregon has done. They've had high level QBs. Who's the best they've had? They've had Joey Harrington. They've had Marcus Mariota, Darren Thomas. I don't remember who. I mean, Herbert, obviously. And then this past year, I mean, Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel. So this is tough. I'll give them an 8 out of 10. Man, Mariota. So for Clemson, I'm giving them 10 out of 10 easily with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. Like that's obvious. With ASU, we only have 1 year of Levitt being awesome, but he was awesome. And I mean, there's a very good chance in the 2026 NFL draft, he's like a top 5 pick. So I'll just keep it at 8 out of 10. I'll give Oregon the advantage. I'll give Oregon 8.5 out of 10. Maybe I am misremembering how good Mariota was. But it felt like a lot when Oregon, the first like era, the early Chip Kelly era, it wasn't so much about like, oh, they have these high level quarterbacks that take them over the top. It's like Chip Kelly's scheming all this stuff open. They're running it so fast. So that's why I'll give 8.5 out of 10 for Oregon. No one's been able to like break through and lead them into a national championship season. And Bo Nix had the opportunities to do it last year against UW. And I don't know if Oregon beats Michigan, but they would have at least made it to another championship game. So, and Levitt, I'll put an 8 out of 10. He still has some things to learn, and there's some potential there. But yeah, so all of that, we can add them up. Let's see how it adds up when we calculate everything together. But I just kind of wanted to see how it all kind of shakes up. I think doing this, the points will show that ASU doesn't have quite as much as Oregon and Clemson, but they are not. There's not nothing to work with, right? Like the ASU location is there. So that's 40.5 points for ASU. Oregon. There's a reason why people over the years have called ASU the sleeping giant, even though I could go back and forth with that, but there is reason to believe that ASU can achieve more than it has. I didn't put in conference stuff. I kind of just baked that in, but ASU being in the Big 12 has its pluses and minuses, right? Like you're in the Big 12, you don't have to go through the very best competition, but it also hurts you in recruiting because all these other schools that are recruiting against you, if you're recruiting against like Arkansas or Ole Miss or something, they can say, "Hey, we're playing the best of the best." You can't credibly say that if you're a Big 12 coach. You can't say, "Hey, we play the best of the best." You can dance around it and say, say we play a great schedule and all this, we play a Power Four, but you can't credibly say we play the best of the best. So Oregon is at 42.5. A lot of that is factored in from Uncle Phil, to say the least. And then Clemson, just when I'm adding this up, it seems like they are going to be ahead. I really, really do not like adding with my phone calculator because I mess it up all the time. Okay, 9 and 8. So 53. So based on this, ASU is much closer to Oregon than it is Clemson. But if there is a high-profile donor that decides to really pump his or her money into ASU, then things become very, very interesting for the Sun Devils, because that is missing. Not necessarily like that there aren't any boosters, but in terms of a billionaire like Phil Knight, or I know Ohio State has some legit capital B billionaires backing them. Michigan definitely does, especially after it paid, what was it, like $8 million for Bryce Underwood to come there. So that is the thing that can improve. And I would also say the fan support can definitely go up as well. So there's a chance we could be doing this a year from now, and the fan support and money are both ticked up to 6 out of 10, and all of a sudden ASU is at 42.5. And maybe Levitt, right? If Levitt freaking balls out next year and leads ASU to heights it's never seen, then the high level QB would go up to 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. So just wanted to kind of analyze Dillingham's claim that ASU can become the next team that is a blue blood. Do I 100% agree? I don't. I think I think being in the Big 12 doesn't help. And I think like ASU for its entire history has been an above average program, but nothing more, right? There hasn't been or I shouldn't say that. Since it entered the Pac-12 or Pac-10, there hasn't been like sustained levels of 9-10 win seasons, right? I think Todd Graham, when he won 10 games, back-to-back 10-game seasons in 13 and 14, that was the first time they've done it since Frank Kush. So there's an Atlanta Falcons-y vibe with ASU, where maybe the Atlanta Falcons aren't the best, but like they've popped up, right? They made the Super Bowl in the late 90s, and then they popped up with Vic and made it to the NFC Championship game. They popped up twice with Matt Ryan, made it to the Super Bowl, made it to the NFC Championship game. Like there's a similar, I mean, Falcons have probably been worse outside of those years than ASU has been, but there's a similar kind of win-loss peaks and valleys there. So I'll say this: after looking through this, it's not like it's some crazy outlandish claim for Dillingham to say, you know what, we can become a blue blood. And granted, he's saying that after an 11-win season in a conference championship, but there has to be some proof of concept, right? So, and I will say, with how the 2026 recruiting class has started out, I want to be very clear how it started out. Not how it's going to end up. There's a big difference. But you have Fetty committed, and you have the Israel Briggs 4-star tight end committed, and you have a few other high 3-stars in there. You start getting a few more 4-stars, a potential 5-star in the mix, then it becomes a little different. So the foundation is being built, and the potential is there. I'll say that. All right. Thank you for watching my faceless episode. just so annoying that my camera doesn't work right now. It's if Colton gets his camera fixed, then mine goes on the fritz, of course. So that's just how it goes. All right, gonna wrap this one up. Thank you for watching and listening. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And you know what? Go Sun Devils.